Welcome, everyone, to our electronic council meeting. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, Regional Council is practicing physical distancing, and the majority of councilors are participating electronically, while a few others are present in the council chambers. In an attempt to speed things up, we have assigned a mover and a seconder, and I will read these out. Then I will state the result of the vote. Now I'm going to entertain a motion to reconvene in open session. This is moved by Councillor Kiefer and seconded by Councillor Nowak. I would ask you to use your buttons if you're participating remotely and vote with the check mark or the X, and a show of hands, those in favor in the chamber. Okay. That was carried. It was unanimous of everybody in the chamber. In the last few weeks, we have seen an increase in acts of hate speech, racism, and white supremacy in our community. Hate crime is a criminal offense. It is not welcomed in our community. I have spoken with Waterloo Regional Police and understand that these activities are being investigated. Today, as Regional Chair, I am committed alongside my council colleagues to stand against hate speech, racism, and discrimination, to continue to do my own personal work of learning how we can make policy changes to our internal and community-based anti-racism work, and to amplify the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color and marginalized people in our community. Today, we will hear from Waterloo Regional Police Service and from regional staff with regards to the action plans and consultations with Black, Indigenous, and marginalized communities. This work will continue to inform the region's anti-racism initiative and future anti-racism plan. On Thursday, July the 30th, we will host an anti-racism town hall meeting virtually to have a community conversation. I look forward to how this work will evolve as we continue to build community relationships that will inform our government decisions as we move forward. I would now ask Leanne Wetzel to do the roll call.
Chair Redmond.
Here.
Councillor Armstrong.
Here.
Councillor Clark. Here. Councillor Erb.
Here.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Galloway.
Here.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Harris. Councillor Jaworski.
Here.
Councillor Jowett.
Here.
Councillor Kiefer.
Here.
Councillor Rentz.
Here.
Councillor McGarry.
Here.
Councillor Nowak.
Here.
Councillor Shantz.
Here.
Councillor Strickland. Councillor Strickland. And Councillor Verbanovic.
Here.
So Councillors Harris and Strickland absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Councillor Jowett.
As stated in the previous meeting, Chair Redmond, I would like to draw attention to the conflict of interest that I have on report. Do I need to read the whole deal?
It is the official plan, right? The regional official plan report?
It is, yes. So it's from the Committee of Planning, Development, and Legislative Services. The subject matter is Regional Official Plan Review Update. The report number is Peter, Doug, Larry, Carol, Paul, Larry of 20 to 21. And it is with regards to proposed land needs assessment. And I own property at 215 Holiday Inn Drive, whereas the significant employment land designation is being removed or reassessed.
Thank you, Councillor Jowett. I see no other declarations of pecuniary interest, so yours is duly noted. Presentations this evening, I'd like to call on Chief Larkin to make a presentation on behalf of the Waterloo Regional Police Services. This is in response to Council's previous motion around anti-racism report HRC-CIT-20-02, Anti-Racism Initiative. Welcome, Chief Larkin.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much, Chair Redmond and members of Regional Council.
It's a privilege to attend Regional Council virtually on behalf of all members of Waterloo Regional Police Service, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to join you this afternoon to speak about a very important issue around the work that our police service in partnership with the Police Services Board has been doing internally. As well, that will be our focus, but we continue to do external work as well. I do want to echo the sentiments of Regional Chair Redmond that these have been challenging times in our community, specifically as we continue to see hate speech, hate propaganda, and ongoing vitriol throughout our community on social media, as well as in the general promotion across our region. It's simply unacceptable, and our hate crime and extremist team continues to do significant work. Joining me virtually is also Deputy Chief Hsiu-Li Hilton, who oversees our neighborhood policing, as well as Deputy Chief Mark Crowell, who oversees our member services. And if I may, I'm going to share the screen.
Yes, you may. We can see it.
Excellent. Thank you very much again for this opportunity. And I want to take an opportunity just over the last 40 years, a bit of a historical context. As many of you on Regional Council are aware, as our police service has been renowned both provincially and nationally as a service that continues to learn, that continues to innovate, and continues to lead across not only provincially but nationally. But when we focus particularly around our anti-racism and addressing systemic discrimination and systemic within our police service, there's a number of key initiatives that have been ongoing. And I'm going to focus over the last 6 years, some of the work that we've been doing as an organization in partnership with the Police Services Board, as well as consultation with our community. And one of those key pieces is the Police Services Board strategic plan, as well as aligned with the Police Services operational plan. And embedded in that plan is a significant commitment to organizational culture and organizational transformation. And that includes addressing systemic barriers as well as systemic discrimination within our organization, as well as working towards a Waterloo region where everyone thrives. We recognize that change is required, not only in policing, but within our community and within our system as a whole. Operationally, our hate crime and extremist team has been in operation since the late 2000s, 2007 and 2008. Our police service was a founding partner and continues to coordinate the provincial activities of the hate crime and extremist team, partnering with the large 13 urban services, including the Ontario Provincial Police, and is embedded locally within our police service, which provides support. In 2004, our police service then was the first organization and agency to launch then a bias-free policing procedure. Over the years, it's significantly been evolved and actually developed into a bias-neutral procedure. And that is a piece where we continue to audit our functions within our service and the way we provide policing services. In 2017, we launched the Regulated Interaction Procedure based on aligning ourselves with the Ontario Police Services Act. But behind the scenes, our police service was integral in the provincial framework. We worked very closely with the Solicitor General's office, and we also worked very closely as a lead in Justice Hollock's recommendations and partnered extensively with the work around regulated interactions. We do report quarterly on the work and the activities of our police service, which exceeds the provincial standards, as well as we also were the first and only police service in Ontario to include an intelligence note procedure, which gauges police activity around crime in our communities and who we come in contact with through observation and or direct contact. The race-based data collection procedure is in progress. There's a portion of it that has been implemented effective January 1st of 2020, and that refers around the actual use of force. Provincial Police Services Act did change to mandate police service boards and police services to collect use of force around race-based data collection. But we have expanding that across our organization and all facets of the work we do. And we're also, senior leaders are heavily involved in both the provincial and national framework, as well as working collectively with the Ontario Human Rights Commission around standardization, both provincially and nationally, so we can actually look at provincial issues, national issues, and how they actually connect into our organization and into our community. And so some significant work moving through on that, and that remains in progress, including a respect in the workplace procedure, which is in progress. which will also look at intervention around incidences of use of force, etc. One area that we've identified, but will also include an ethical framework, an ethical decision framework, as well as a code of conduct for our members. All of these things are aligned with the Ontario Police Services Act, but more importantly, they're aligned with Police Service Board policy. And so a significant overview of some of the current issues in play or things that have been in our historical context. But the one piece that I want to talk about this evening with Regional Council is something that we've been working on over the last number of years, since late 2017. And that is our actual equity and inclusion and diversity strategic plan. In 2017, with the support of the Police Services Board and ultimate budget approval by Regional Council, we invested 3 full-time resources in an equity, inclusion, diversity team. And so we had transitioned a long time and a historic diversity committee that was doing work internally on a number of issues, and we felt it was necessary in time to evolve our commitment to equity, inclusion, and diversity, and actually launched a full-time equity unit. And the work that they've been doing, significant internal engagement and external engagement, but they've been looking at a number of different processes. And this year in March of 2020, with the support of external equity consultants and subject matter experts in consultation with the community, we launched the first ever Waterloo Police Services and Police Services Board Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Strategic Plan. It has significant leadership commitment from the executive to the senior leadership team, and of course, strongly supported by the Police Services Board because we felt it was necessary. In fact, the Equity and Inclusion Diversity team reports directly to the Office of the Chief of Police with a conduit to the Police Services Board to reinforce the important culture and organizational transformation that continues to be required and evolve to meet a modernized police service to provide modernized policing services to our community. It's built on 5 pillars, and I'll take you through very quickly through the 5 pillars. And of course, naturally, with all of these different pillars, there's goals and objectives throughout our equity, inclusion, diversity, and all of the outcomes, all of the outputs are strictly measured, they're strictly monitored, and they're reported to the Police Services Board. So we have dedicated resources, we have a communication plan internally as well as externally, and of course that breeds the natural importance of this, which is accountability. The first pillar of the plan is total community engagement. And Chair Redmond, you referenced this at the commencement of the meeting. Trust and confidence in public systems, in public institutions, including the police service, is necessary. We can only police with the consent of our community. We can only consent with community partnerships. And that is at the heart of the work that we do, which is community engagement and ensuring that we're meeting the needs of the citizens that we serve. And so you can see from an achievement perspective in each of these areas, we've been monitoring and measuring with our equity consultant and subject matter experts where we are, where we need to go, and what the future looks like for our police service. And there's been some significant work happening around that, including a revamp of the ambassador program, which brings about members of our service, representative of our community of all levels, uniformed members, civilian members, professionals, senior leaders, and our commitment to providing more strategic partnerships with our diverse community, our diverse neighborhoods, and stakeholders. You can see some very clear actions, and one is very pertinent right now, which is the plan for coordinated community police response to high-profile occurrences, including hate crimes and hate incidents. Some of the incidents that come forward as hate crime may not necessarily meet the threshold of the Criminal Code of Canada, but they're significantly a hate incident. They cannot be tolerated in our community, and yet we have to develop a better response to ensure that we track and monitor hate incidences, and we ensure that we provide support to those communities that are targeted. Clearly, we continue our work with Wellbeing Waterloo Region and a significant amount of engagement to moving to upstream prevention and restorative justice approach to the issues that we deal with. Annually, the police services responds and manages more than 309,000 calls for service. And we recognize that we can enhance call management to divert. And part of that is working with Wellbeing Waterloo Region to see how we better serve our communities, and particularly our communities that are diverse, that are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, that often are overrepresented in conflict and or in interactions with policing and or our judicial system. Again, we also want to develop an enhanced process for diverse community members to exchange information and provide direct feedback. And that is much going to be aligned with the proposed anti-racism secretariat of the Regional Waterloo. Our Police Services Board and yourself, Chair Redmond, and your team have been doing significant engagement that we will continue to support and align our work with the Police Services Board, and more importantly, from a regional perspective, with the Anti-Racism Secretariat. We still have other continued operational needs that we're committed to fulfilling, including work around in consultation with our Indigenous community as we look at calls to action and justice based out of the Truth and Reconciliation Report. And again, we continue to establish measurable goals so we can monitor trust and progress towards our community service and goals. And recently, as a part of Wellbeing Waterloo, we did actually survey and look at trust within policing and trust within our organization and within our membership. So total community engagement, pillar number one, and I will also add that an overarching advisory committee is currently working, and there's champions in each pillar. And very shortly, when we report to the board in September, the Police Services Board will see our total engagement plan, whereas we have a planned rollout to engage our community. The second piece is diversity competent members. You know, 30 years ago, when I joined the police service with Deputy Hilton, our community looked very differently. As we look at the progression and the evolution and the growth of our community and the diversity and the strength of our community now, it's very much different. And it's important for us to ensure that our members are competent and understand diversity, understand the challenges that those that interact with policing or engage with policing, that our members understand and have a better understanding and more competently based around diversity. And so we made a commitment 2 years ago to ensure that all of our members had mandatory training around unconscious bias and implicit bias. And this was a specific request from our community. Our Police Services Board participated in that training. Our executive, our senior leadership team, every mid-leader within our organization has participated in the mandatory training using an external equity consultant. And of course, now we're rolling it out across the organization, slightly delayed based on the global pandemic where we had to cease training, but is once again rolling through our entire organization, and every single member will be trained in implicit and unconscious bias. We continue to advance anti-harassment and respect in the workplace training. We've added equity, inclusion, diversity component to our field development officer training program. Feel is extremely important that our new recruits that are being trained by field development officers understand the importance, and those that are doing the training understand the importance of diversity competent members. We're also currently in the process of training all of our members in cultural competency training around Indigenous awareness, as well as moving towards, as I mentioned, the frontline training. We continue to identify gaps in our training program around specifically equity, inclusion, and diversity. And as our Police Service Board members will recognize that we actually added an additional leadership position to look at all those gaps and to work with our equity team to ensure that we actually continue to advance and weave the importance of our EID plan throughout our organization. Of course, we continue to look at tailored level for different branches and various levels of the organization. And of course, we want to continue that knowledge and training transfer throughout all of our education and awareness organizationally. So pillar number 2, diversity competent members. Pillar number 3, a diverse workforce. The Police Services Board, in their strategic plan, is the commitment to build a police service that is reflective of the community we serve. That has been embraced by the executive, it's been embraced by our senior leadership team, and has been a focus of the work that we've been doing. Our recruiters, both on our uniform and civilian professional side, are focusing on attending college and university and other community recruitment events to attract and acquire the best talent for our police service. Very much diversity-focused recruitment information services. We were one of the first services in the province to move towards sessions which were specifically based around diversity, and utilizing our members who volunteer through the ambassador program to build connections, to engage and welcome individuals into our community. Currently underway, we have a significant outreach program with the Nigerian community. Our job descriptions, every single one of them is being reviewed in partnership with an external job evaluation consultant around employee equity and diversity requirements for the job that they're performing. And we're also now recognizing members who participate in outreach to diverse communities and have created an internal diversity award to promote, recognize, and value the importance of the work that our members do around external engagement. There's still work to be done. We revamped recently our recruiting system for police officers. The Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, in partnership with the Solicitor General, has revamped the recruiting process as we look at systemic barriers, potentially systemic discrimination within those systems, to ensure that all members have an equitable and egalitarian approach to joining our police service and police services in Ontario. It's a province-wide initiative. And of course, we are working on a tracking system to look at whether or not there are any internal WRPS systemic barriers that hinder and inhibit the recruitment and hiring of diverse candidates. We scrutinize our recruitment and hiring process to ensure that we identify all those barriers and make the changes, and Deputy Crowell's leading that initiative in partnership with Ms. Kimple. And of course, we continue to increase the diversity competence of our recruiters. So a diverse workforce is something that is extremely important to us. We've made significant strides around gender equity. We still have work to do around building and reflecting an organization that has more racialized members and represents the community we serve. Pillar number 4 is leadership that reflects our community. And again, we've made some significant strides, particularly around women in leadership roles. We've increased significantly over the last 6 years. In fact, all of our patrol divisions, the senior leadership team is in an equity balanced approach. We have gender equity. Our domestic violence team, we have gender equity. Our special victims unit, we have gender equity. Our youth protection unit, we have gender equity. All of these things were requested by our community through our external sexual assault review team. The reality is, though, we still need to do work around ensuring that Black and Indigenous and persons of color continue to advance into our leadership roles across the organization. And that includes through our mid-leadership roles, our mid-manager roles, our senior leadership roles, and our executive leadership roles. Our transfer process has been completely redesigned. It's much more member-directed, and it seeks diverse members where we recognize organizational need. Management has participated in 360 feedback aimed at strength-based leadership and strength-based development. And we continue, and we recently, Deputy Chief Hsiu-Li Hilton has launched a formal mentoring program, the Professional Development Network, and has been very focused on advancing that and building mentorship for those that are underrepresented in our leadership team across the organization. We've just recently approved changes to our current promotional process to remove systemic barriers and systemic bias. And we're just in the process of rolling out, in partnership with the Police Services Board, a significant census of all our members, so we can actually assess and understand the diversity across our service. We're also looking at our mentoring program to ensure underrepresented groups are included and members are better prepared and ready for promotion and transfer opportunities within our organization and advancement. As a part of this, this month as well, myself and Deputy Hilton and Deputy Crowell will be joining and hosting several town hall sessions, particularly meeting with Black, Indigenous, and people of color within our organization. And we have an ongoing work and program in place as we look to, in many ways, get our house sorted out as we work towards our external engagement. And we're very excited. It's being organized by members of our equity team, as well as other volunteer members that have come forward. Those will occur later in the month. And the last pillar is very important. In fact, it may be one of the most important ones, where we want members to feel secure and supported in their workplace. This is extremely important for members to come to work and feel supported. And so in our internal work that we've done with our equity consultant, where we've made some strides particularly is that members recognize that we're a comfortable workplace, particularly for members of the LGBTQS2S community. And so we received significant feedback, and we've really evolved as an organization over the last decade. All of our facilities, with the exception of North Division, have gender-neutral washrooms, and within our capital budget, North Division will be retrofitted. And in fact, in our new division, at Central Division on Frederick Street, we'll be moving towards a gender-neutral room and locker room where members get ready for work. And so we're advancing significantly the work that we're doing. Of course, the foundation of our workplace procedures and our process all respect equity, inclusion, and diversity. And there's a lens that's placed on all of those workplace procedures. Of course, the Wellness Unit and peer support has been a great achievement. The Police Services Board has invested significant dollars, and we've seen the return on investment with members who are no longer away from work and feel much more supported and secure. Our annual Women in Leadership Committee program continues to flourish. As I said, we've made tremendous success around equity, particularly gender equity. We continue to move towards a tolerance climate around negative workplace culture. It's a work in progress. We've recently made shift changes in job sharing to accommodate family care needs. And of course, we've been rolling out and have rolled out workplace training for all supervisors, because we believe that if we have respect in the workplace, we have a healthy workplace, we have a workplace that values and understands diversity, then naturally the work that we do in our community is enhanced. We're not striving for perfection, but we're striving for excellence. We're a human organization and we're not perfect, and we recognize that. And naturally, as Chair Redmond and members of council have heard me, I recognize that our organization is not immune to systemic racism, is not immune to systemic discrimination, and we're working very hard at addressing those issues. Some of the current actions is that we're enhancing our harassment and discrimination procedures. We're developing support networks for all underrepresented groups. We're assisting members to support a healthy work-life balance, and we're developing strategies to address pockets of resistance. We're on a significant culture change program here. We're transforming our organization, we're modernizing our organization, and for those of you that had an opportunity to witness one of our recruit ceremonies where we welcome our new recruits, the talent acquisition and the members that we're bringing into our organization are extremely bright, they're extremely educated, they're talented, and I do believe our future is bright if we continue to work towards that change. So naturally, there's a leadership commitment. This is part of the board's strategic priorities, the focus on anti-racism initiatives, anti-Black racism initiatives. All attempts to address implicit and unconscious bias is a part of our board's strategic priorities. It's aligned with our operational plan. The statements and actions of the Police Services Board and our leadership team reaffirm our commitment. We recognize that there's work to be done. We recognize that there's opportunities for positive change in our community. And we recognize that the role of policing can be redefined in partnership with all levels of government, our community, and those that come in contact with the police through our significant engagement. And of course, the achievement of our equity, inclusion, diversity team, and I do want to publicly applaud Staff Sergeant Julie Sudds and Sergeant Eric Poynton for their leadership over the last 2 years. They've moved the needle significantly within our organization through some challenging work. It has not been easy. We still have actions though. We still have work to do. This work should never be done. We should always be striving for improvement. That includes a statement of operational benefits of equity, inclusion, diversity, continue to embed the understanding of the benefits of equity, inclusion, diversity through our professional development processes. And of course, we need to continue to update and enhance our procedures. We also need to continue to develop measures as we look at interim progress and milestones, and the actual strategic plan does have measurements and milestones, including mandatory reporting to the Police Services Board. Naturally, the collection of evidence-based strategies around whether or not these implementations are being effective and efficient, analyzing the data, assessing our progress against the milestone and goals, and looking at where we need to head and where we need to go and where we've come from. We continue to report quarterly to the senior leadership team and to the Police Services Board around these actions and outcomes, and in September will be the next update to the board, and continue to work on reporting milestones, which reminds all of us and informs the stakeholders of the extent of goal achievement. And so much of our focus internally to addressing any racism has been around the development of our strategic plan. I know that Mark, Shirley, and I are looking forward to meeting with our Black, Indigenous, and people of color members to have candid conversation, honest conversation, collective feedback, as well as looking at how we continue to advance the path forward. And our goal is transformation within our organization, culture change within our organization, and we do believe that this will roll and continue to provide our level of services to our community, which is enhanced. And so we've deemed this entire process the path forward. And the path forward, in our estimation, has to be a collective path forward. Working with the Police Services Board, working with regional and area municipal councils, working with our stakeholders, working with all of our different partners, our neighborhoods, our diverse neighborhoods, and working with our community, and particularly our Black, Indigenous, and people of color community, to ensure that we walk together. And that's a question I consistently ask our community, is will you walk with us? Will you actually work with us to advance and move the path forward? And before we actually start the walk, we recognize that we have work to do internally, and hence the work of the advisory committee over June, July, and August as we prepare for September to work with the board to launch a significant external engagement plan, which is also tied to the work that we're doing around the new strategic plan in partnership with the Police Services Board. And so that is our path forward, and we will update the Police Services Board in September. We're people-focused. The business that we do in policing is human-centric. 309,000 calls a year. Every single day, 827 calls. Every hour, 34 new calls for service. Every 1 minute and 45 seconds, a call comes into our communication center seeking some form of police support. So the work we do is people-focused, both internally and externally. And we're people-driven. The only way that we can make change in our community, to have a thriving community, is to have the collective impact of all of us working together for a safer, healthier community. This week or last week, you would have recognized that the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police came forward with a policy piece calling on federal government for policy reform. And that was around decriminalization of small amounts of possession of illicit drugs. If you look at our current challenges we're facing as a region, a global pandemic, financial challenges, social unrest around relationships with our Black, Indigenous, and people of color, tied into the challenges of mental health, addiction, we have an opportunity for change here. We have an opportunity to reshape the community that we live in. We have an opportunity to reshape the services we deliver. And so being people-focused and people-driven provides us that opportunity. And our commitment as a police service is to be people-focused and people-driven. There are opportunities for change. I want to be extremely clear. Currently, our police service is one of the few agencies that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And with that comes significant challenges around providing services. We also provide regional services, such as our communication center, which supports our regional paramedics through the downstreaming of 911 calls to Ontario Health. It supports our fire services. It supports our Alert Waterloo region program. And so we provide a significant foundation and a base to other regional services because our business is one that is 24/7, 365. And we recognize that with that comes a financial burden. Recognize that in the current pandemic and the current challenges that we're facing in our community, that there's different ways. And so our commitment to you is that we're continuing internally to look at social services and how do we innovate some of the work that we do. We're working with the CMHA, we're working with Ontario Health. Our mental health teams impact have significant success, but they can only respond to about 51% of all mental health related calls because they're only available between 9 a.m. and 11 p.m. And we know that social challenges are 24 hours a day. We have a growing and a challenging expansion of crime. The hate crime that we're seeing is not unique to our community, but it also doesn't transcend any specific geography. It moves from community to community. And so recently some of the simply unacceptable hate speech is tied to other communities such as Guelph, Durham region. And so we're partnering with those services. We know that the 401 corridor, we're very much connected to Greater Toronto Area crime. And of course, we police a second community now, and that is the online community, the World Wide Web, where you can be anywhere and committing crimes in the Waterloo region. And so policing itself needs to significantly modernize. It needs to significantly grow. And our police service has a history of being a leader, provincially and nationally, and we remain committed to that. I recognize that we're facing financial issues, and we have met with the regional CFO, Mr. Dyer, to realign capital projects, to look at our current operational project, and we are meeting with the board to ensure and reinforce our commitment that we recognize that for our system to work, everybody must work together. So again, on behalf of Deputy Chief Crowell and Deputy Chief Hilton and all the members, I want to take this opportunity to thank the region. I would also be remiss if in a public session I did not take an opportunity to recognize the work of our members. These have been challenging times to be a police officer, likely the most challenging in a generation. But every single day, they continue to serve our community with best intentions to make a difference in the lives of the people that we come in contact with. And although we do not always get it right, and although we are not perfect, we continue to push for excellence. And I know that the members who come to work every single day are committed to making a difference in the community. We have systems and different processes in place to manage challenges that come about. Some of those may need to be modernized. Some of those may need provincial legislative change. So let's commit collectively to advancing the positive change that we want to see reflected in our police service and your police service and our community. So once again, Chair Redmond and members of Regional Council, thank you for the opportunity to spend a short period of time with you on an important issue, one that needs attention. And I want to reassure you that it is receiving the attention it requires. It is a priority within our organization, and in fact, it is the top priority within our organization as we manage our day-to-day operations. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief Larkin. I see some questions. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through the chair. You know, Bryan, mental health is something that everybody is very concerned about, and you mentioned CMHA. I was wondering if you could walk us through how that works. So somebody calls 911, police go there, and then they realize, you know what, CMHA would really be valuable here. CMHA may or may not be available. They come there. Is it turned over from the police to CMHA? Could you just walk me through that, please?
Chief?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Jaworski, through the chair. So if we receive about approximately on average 3,500 calls for service related to mental health a year in Waterloo region. So the calls can come through two different ways. They can come through 911. They can come through the general number. From different times, they may come from a self-help line and or may come from a Grand River Hospital or St. Mary's Hospital. We'll take all the information, we'll assess it, and depending on the threshold, so for example, there may be a significant crisis where crisis intervention is required. It may require specialized response, so negotiators, as well as our impact team, as members of Regional Council may be aware, they're actually embedded in all of our divisions. So we have 3 mental health nurses that work in our primary divisions, Cambridge, Kitchener, and Waterloo. They have a separate office, so they can access in a separate area, Ontario health records, etc., to bring experience and background to those calls for service. And so, you know, our communication center would look at the threshold of the call, and they would deploy and or dispatch a police officer and or the impact team. They'll attend the call. The police officer and mental health nurse may make an assessment whether or not the individual needs to be apprehended under Mental Health Act or can be diverted into the health system. So just to give you some insight, of the 3,500 calls, the CMHA impact nurses get to about 51% in Waterloo region. So it's, you know, fairly significant, almost half. Out of those 51%, they're diverting a significant amount. Almost 40% are diverted from emergency rooms. So the mental health impact nurse is able to divert, refer, and actually reduce the workload within the hospital system. And then the individuals that are apprehended, so the mental health nurse will make a determination and suggest to the officer this individual needs to be apprehended for their safety or the safety of others. When we do transport that health client, to the hospital. Almost 95% of those that actually attend the hospital are actually admitted to hospital. So we're seeing a significant rate of admission, and our average wait time now at the hospital in both the city of Cambridge and the city of Kitchener at GRH and St. Mary's, our average wait time is about 1 hour, which is greatly reduced from what it used to be. So the investment of health dollars into the system has actually made a significant impact. And no pun intended, actually, but, and so what we're trying to do is advocate for the change of that. But also, often at these calls, potentially will be paramedics. And so I'll give you an example. The other night, an individual in crisis wanted to take their life. They were in the city of Kitchener at Victoria Park. This is Monday evening. They attempted to take their life by jumping into the water. Officers were able to attend with other agencies. So paramedics were there. The impact nurse did not arrive prior to the officers being able to encourage the individual to come to shore to seek support. But in that particular case, paramedics actually transported the individual. And so it was automatically transferred at the scene to a healthcare-led initiative. So I think that this is one area where we can make some significant change when we look at the system. We do believe that, mental health, police should not be the primary caregiver. The reality is that we're breaking down the data for the Police Services Board, but a number of those calls, regrettably often have some form of either danger to oneself or danger to somebody else that would prompt police response. We do not have to be the primary responder. We do not have to be the primary intervener. We've seen tremendous impact with the impact team. It's working well. Look at the analysis, and we do monthly analysis. Clearly, the return on investment is there, and our intent is to advocate for a renewed approach, one where the police service may continue to be the 24-hour call center, but may not be the primary responder.
Thank you, Chief. Very thorough.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galloway.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Chief, for a very comprehensive presentation. And there's lots to be proud of that the service is doing. The Equity, Inclusion, Diversity program is one of those things. But I think that what I've learned, and I think a lot of other people have learned more recently with the Black Lives Matter issue and advocacy, that there's something else that needs to be done by individuals that are in positions of authority, such as ourselves and police officers, and that's the self-reflection of white privilege. And I'm just wondering if in any of the educational or training programs now that you talked about, and I know that are ongoing within the service for senior leadership as well as for civilians and first-class officers as well. Is that an area where there is some effort now being put in terms of training opportunities, training sources, resources for people to utilize?
Chief?
Thank you, Councillor Galloway, through you, Chair Redmond. And before I answer the question, I do want to take a moment to recognize Councillor Galloway, Councillor Shantz, and Councillor Kiefer, along with Chair Redmond, who have been heavily involved in the Police Services Board in my tenure. And thank you for your leadership. In fact, the launch of the Equity unit was under Councillor Galloway's tenure as board chair, and was supportive of investment of monies during some challenging financial times. But so it absolutely, Councillor Galloway, is that self-reflection ought to be a part of any leadership position every single day. And as Chair Redmond and members of the board know, I've spoken very publicly about the privilege that I have as a white chief and how I need to actually continue to action that privilege to make change within our organization, but also policing in general in the province and nationally. I do have a voice, and it's important for me to use that voice. So I can tell you that the Police Services Board and the executive and senior leadership team have had education and awareness around privilege and white privilege. And we're rolling that out very shortly again to our mid-leaders Our membership right now is undergoing implicit unconscious bias, but the next piece and the next iteration of this, in partnership with the ongoing Indigenous awareness and cultural training and education that's happening, will be specific anti-Black racism training and anti-racist training for the Police Services Board, the executive, the senior leadership team. We'll roll that through our mid-leadership team, and then the next iteration will roll to every single member of the organization. So it is on our platform. Our equity team is working on that. We're looking at current consultants that can and subject matter experts to deliver the training and education sessions to the board, to the executive, to the senior leadership team, to the mid-leadership team, and then to the entire organization. So definitively, we agree that reflection and that advancement of knowledge and understanding throughout our organization is a massive and a critical key to our successes in changing and transforming culture and actually working towards authentic community engagement where we continue to see the change that our community is asking for. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because what I've learned in just the last few months is that that's almost a precursor to being able to move forward on all the other great initiatives that the service has. The next question I had was, I'm just curious, where are you at in reviewing, and I know it's not council's prerogative to provide any direction, but I'm just curious as to where you are in reviewing the community resource officers and the COP program.
Thanks so much, Councillor Galloway, and certainly part of the path forward and what we've committed to the Police Services Board is a series of different pieces. I did not raise all of them today in interest of managing time in my presentation, but there's a couple of pieces we're looking at. One of them is the Community Resource Program. Deputy Chief Hilton it's part of her ongoing plan with the Police Services Board. And as you know, the Community Resource Officer has evolved significantly over the years. Our police service, really dating back to Chief Bassey, where it was the introduction of policing, followed by Chief Greville, who moved us towards mobilization and social development. The Community Resource Officer role was designed, but we've seen significant changes, particularly in the various communities that we provide services to. So, for example, in the city of Cambridge, our Community Resource Officer is very much focused in downtown Galt, dealing with addiction issues, working with social agencies and social services to address the challenges that come with addiction, which many on this virtual call know my passion to changing policy around addiction to a health issue. Addiction ought not be a criminal issue. It's a health issue that should be treated and should be managed through that. So the Community Resource Officer program is somewhat different in the city of Kitchener. We have multiple community resource officers. We have 2 officers that are specifically work in the downtown core, 1 square kilometer that has the largest demand on policing in the region of Waterloo. So every single day, the largest demand on draw on our service is in the downtown core. Those 2 officers, again, work with House of Friendship, the Working Center, Consumption Treatment Center, Public Health, Social Services, and those that are in need. They very much work with the outreach workers in ensuring change. During the global pandemic, one of the Kitchener Community Resource Officers was very much attached to the Pandemic Social Services Control Working Group to provide policing support. We've been working and supporting the Lot 42 tent city to ensure those that need homes have access to shelter. And then in Uptown Waterloo, the Community Resource Officer program is slightly different. It's really around engagement with the Business Improvement Association, and the challenges are slightly different in Uptown Waterloo. And then the Community Resource Officer in the townships is very different because the nature and the need, they're very much focused on farm education and working with our Mennonite community, preventing collisions with horse and buggies. And so you can see that the one approach to community resource is very different in the communities we serve. So we are engaging and working on that. We anticipate an update to the Police Services Board in September. So right now it's status quo around the PRO program. And the one piece that I failed to mention is that 3 community resource officers, 1 from Cambridge, Kitchener, and Waterloo, are all tied to the situation and or connectivity tables, where we manage individuals that come in contact with police but really require acute care intervention. It's not a policing issue, but we get called consistently to those types of calls. So we anticipate an update in September around the piece. The school resource officer program has been paused at the request of our school boards. We'll participate. It's essentially external reviews that are occurring in relation to school resource officers. We'll supply all the data. We'll work with our school board partners around supporting their review, but that program is on pause. And then finally, the community outreach program with the City of Kitchener, and there's also a community outreach program in the City of Cambridge in partnership with the Neighborhood Association. Those programs are on pause currently based on the global pandemic. We understand that the City of Kitchener is conducting a review and or looking at different options, and our commitment is to work with the City of Kitchener, in particular with their community service department, to share data, to share any information they have as we move forward. But, again, our commitment is to work with our stakeholders, but I can tell you that those, the SRO and the community outreach program is paused for different reasons, but essentially paused, and we look forward to participating in those discussions and dialogue. And we do recognize that not all individuals receive and or view those programs the way that others may, and there's good dialogue. And I think there's always opportunity for enhancement. There's always opportunity for changes. There's always opportunities of looking at things very differently. So we'll continue those pieces. The CROW program has always been designed around preventing crime, upstream prevention. But I think one of the things that for some reason in our community that I think personally as the chief of police and something that I'm passionate about is getting back to the basics of restorative justice and reconciling our past, reconciling crime issues that may not need to go to the judicial system. There's a huge opportunity for us around restorative justice. And I think that we once again, our community, Waterloo region, based out of Elmira, based out of Woolwich Township, is the home of restorative justice. If you think back to the incident in the 70s. So I do hope that once again, we'll bring restorative justice to the forefront of how we do business and focus less on necessarily making everything criminal and or pushing everything to the judicial system. It's time to reconcile a number of issues within our community.
And the third thing, the last thing, Madam Chair, I wanted to ask the Chief, and you did talk about, and I wasn't surprised that you had already said in response to Councillor Jaworski's question that, because I've heard you say this a number of times before, that police are not the best response to mental health calls, but being the almost the default and an inordinate amount of time that staff are tied up in mental health calls at often busy times of the day, and not the best response. And I think there's general agreement in that regard. So what is happening in that regard? Is the chiefs of police proposing something? Are any of the associations, the police lobby in general, working towards to changing the model? What needs to be put in place from a policing point of view in order to get from A to B, to get from where we are now to a much better system? And there are models around. I think one that's been passed around more recently is the one in Eugene, Oregon, where they have a completely different model for responding to mental health calls. Police are a resource, but they are not the first to attend. So what do we need to do? Is there anything actually happening with the Chiefs of Police Association? They have a very powerful voice with the government to change the model.
Chief?
Well, thanks so much, Galloway. And in short, yes. So I can tell you that I've been having conversations with CMHA and Ontario Health. Across the province of Ontario, there's variations of the IMPACT program, the COAST program, mobile crisis intervention. There's similarities to the CAHOOTS program in Ontario. Depending on different Ontario health districts, there's various different approaches. I guess not every model fits every community based on size, based on geography, those types of processes. And so I can tell you that as your chief of police, And as a past president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police and a member of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, I've been advocating loudly for change around this process. In fact, several years ago, we attempted to introduce law enforcement assisted version, the LEAD program, which was based out of the USA, out of Seattle and Philadelphia. Of course, the challenges were that some of our partner agencies did not have the resourcing or the staffing and or the sustainable funding to advance some of these issues. So it simply didn't move forward. But, the call last week around our drug policy piece is also tied to, quite frankly, mental health. We know that often those that have addictions also have other concurrent disorders, mental health and other health challenges. And so it would provide police officers different sanctions versus a criminal sanction. In fact, our goal is diversion. So we are working, and I can tell you that I am advocating with the Solicitor General around a renewed approach to how we handle mental health calls, because I think to your comment, we become everything to everyone, partially because we're around. And so at 4 a.m, we're working and we respond and we support. So I guess I would just ask for some slight patience because we are navigating several levels of government. I know the Police Services Board Chair Edmonds engaged in this discussion equally because we also need change around the legislative piece. The only individual that can apprehend somebody under Mental Health Act is a police officer. So if you look at the work we do in downtown Kitchener, many calls bypass the police service, and the outreach worker from House of Friendship and or the working center actually manages the incident and works with our community resource officer in downtown. And so we have a very fluid approach. Similarly, we're working towards that in Cambridge with the support of outreach workers where things can bypass the police service and we get appropriate response. It's going to take some time, but I do think that there's commitment from many partners and agencies around the reimagination of how we respond and address mental health calls. I do know, and I can't speak for the Minister of the Solicitor General, but I do know there's commitment around having dialogue and discussion. And I can tell you it's on the agenda of the Ontario Chiefs and the Canadian Chiefs to advance public policy. But there's some work to be done. I can tell you that this week I've had meetings with Ontario Health and CMHA and Regional Waterloo paramedics to how do we actually transform this into a public health or a healthcare-led model where naturally from time to time, I think our community understands the police may have to attend to support mental health nurses or outreach workers or those providing the services, because on a regular occasion, we're called to public institutions, hospitals, and other centers to provide support for people in need. And that includes the workers. So I guess I would ask, stay tuned. I think you'll see some updates to the Police Services Board in September as we work over the next couple of months on that, Councillor Galloway.
Well, it's a bit incongruent. I agree. And when you break your leg, we send the EMS people. When you have a mental health crisis, which is another form of health crisis, we send the police. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Although they may be needed in some cases, in others they're not. Madam Chair, actually my third question was a two-part question.
Now you tell us. Go ahead, Councillor Galloway.
So, Chief, quite apart from mental health and those kinds of things that are really kind of hot topics for alternate kind of resource utilization, you won't be surprised when I ask you this next question, because I asked you a few times anyways. Why do we need a first-class constable at the side of the road with a radar gun? And I only use that as an example. I don't really want you to address that specifically, but it's always been my opinion that we could expand the duties of special constables. We could possibly institute a new form of peace officer that could do lower level kinds of responsibilities that could, at the end of the day, as has happened in the healthcare system, save huge amounts of money that then could be redirected to other needs within the police service or social development programs, which are also programs that could reduce in time, of course, the number of calls for service. If we can put
Chief Larkin?
social development programs into place that are effective.
Thanks, Councillor Galloway. And, first I was participating in the committee to whole as an observer. And so I'd like to push a plug for automated speed enforcement.
There you go.
I think it brings significant values and safety to our community. It's the use of modernized technology. It's not always popular with our citizens, but I think councillors will recognize that their number one complaint is road safety. I can tell you as the chief of police, my number one complaint is road safety from communities. It sort of teeters lately on different issues, but so the whole notion of re-envisioning policing is something that I think is alive and well, and I think that this is the opportunity. I think that this is the greatest opportunity in 50 years that we have as a community and as a police service and as a police profession, and quite frankly, as society as whole, to re-envision the role of policing. This is the opportunity that's presenting itself, and I think I want to reassure you, my commitment as your chief and my commitment to the Police Services Board is I'm engaged in those discussions. In fact, as you'll know, Councillor Galloway, I'm very excited about these discussions because obviously we have to look at ways doing differently. There are obviously instances where, we've seen success in doing business differently. 30 years ago, bylaw was not as expansive as it is today in our communities and serving our municipalities. Bylaw officers do a lot more work today than they did 30 years ago. 30 years ago, Deputy Hilton and I were expected to still write parking tickets. That's not the case today. So we know that evolution and change happens. We know that the introduction of special constables has had tremendous success within policing. And again, I think that these are things that collectively, as a police service board, and as a regional council, and our community, if we bring our voices together, then we can advance and realize the change that we want to see. Now, there are always incidences where police, I believe, will be required based on dealing with the issues at hand and levels of violence, etc. Because we can't not be immune to that we also have some significant crime challenges in our community, largely related to the illicit trafficking of drugs, which then brings organized crime and gangs. But I'm very open to those discussions and want to reassure you that I continue to advocate that both at the board level but provincially. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Councillor Galloway, thank you. I have Councillor Urbanovich and then Councillor Erb. Councillor Urbanovich, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Redmond, and thank you, Chief Larkin, for the very thorough presentation this afternoon, now this evening, and also thank you and quite frankly your entire team for the work that you do 24/7, 365 on behalf of our community. Particularly over the last 4 months, it hasn't been easy. I want to express, at least on behalf of my community, thanks to you and your team for those efforts. Like any organization, there's always going to be challenges. There's going to be individuals who are challenges, and we have to have processes in place to deal with that. And I think today you articulated some of the work that you're doing in that regard. I do want to explore a little further some of the questions that both Councillors Jaworski and Galloway were focusing on in regards to the whole mental health issue. And I'm very encouraged by a lot of what you said. But I also think about things like the connectivity table and the work that is being done there. And yet it seems that so much more could be happening there if there was buy-in from the other orders of government, from our provincial and federal partners. I know many years ago when then Chief McPhee was sort of launching that in Saskatchewan, and now he's in Edmonton. A lot of great work has been done on that. What are the things that are preventing us from growing those kinds of initiatives here in Ontario?
Chief?
Thanks, Councillor Urbanovic. Through you, Chair Redmond. First, I want to, simply say that this is simply not a provincial model. We need to engage our federal government. So I'm happy to hear that piece, because I do think that all levels of government need to be involved in this discussion, particularly as we address the challenges and national approaches to mental health. So I think that the big piece that really we continue, although we work very well collectively, and I will say, Helen Fishburne, the executive director of the Waterloo Wellington CMHA, is an amazing stakeholder, an amazing leader. Dr. Hsiu-Li from Public Health is an amazing stakeholder, an amazing leader, super connected to the work that we do. We're lucky in our region because that happens. It doesn't happen in all regions. We have strong relationships with Grand River and Cambridge Memorial, which both have mental health clinics that provide support to us. But I think that, and I know that this conversation I have with Chair Redmond is that, I really do believe that a provincial summit and or a national summit on policing and how we intersect with mental health is the way to go. There's lots of subject matter experts out there. There's those with lived experience. There's doctors and nurses that are far more qualified to come to the conversation to re-envision how we do business collectively. So I do think that, advocacy through AMO and FCM are strong voices. And if we work collectively, for example, with the Ontario Chiefs, and even the police in Ontario, like our unions of police leadership are certainly, I know, willing to engage in this conversation to advance the change that we want to see. So when in September, we'll be providing an update on the situation tables. Again, they have not had the necessary investment necessarily, and they're both invested differently. So in Cambridge, Lang's through their health partnership has the investment model, and they do a phenomenal job. Bill and his team are amazing. In Kitchener, it's Horizon based, and Tracy and her team are amazing. But there's probably some opportunities for regional connection to look at the root causes. So when we look at acute care intervention, we've never gotten to what's driving the individual being at the situation table, so we can then make the policy change. Sometimes it's so we keep dealing with the issue, they get the help they need, but we never address what the policy issue is, whether it be addiction, mental health, whether it be a hoarding issue, for example. So I think advocacy is a big piece. I think we got to get the players together to have dialogue and do data analysis and look at what's driving the demand on all the different agencies. Because often, and I'll include, even our partners in social services and family children services, if we laid the map, we often are duplicating our services. So police attend, family children services attend. So there's a whole opportunity there. It just, I think locally we've decided to, over the last number of years to work with CMHA, and the impact program and the investment through Ontario Health has been fantastic. But how do we now look at this and make it much more health-led versus police-led? Similarly around drug addiction, let us focus and let the police service get back to the basics, investigating crime and doing the things that we acquire talent to do, versus some of the other things we've picked up as a catch-all.
Yeah, and thanks on that. And I certainly, agree with your comments to Councillor Galloway's question earlier around things like speed enforcement and so on, because quite frankly, I would rather have, professional officers tackling, some of the other issues, more complex issues, as opposed to speed enforcement going forward. But I can tell you, from quite frankly, from an FCM point of view, the of looking at a national kind of summit is something, in fact, that I spoke with my colleagues about recently as something that perhaps we should be looking at across the country with a variety of partners in terms of tackling these things. Yet the next question I have for you is really focused around the issue of cost, and I know there's been a lot of talk, about cost of policing. And I'm wondering if you can just sort of touch on, how do we compare to some of the other major forces in Ontario or in the country from a cost point of view, and also some of the challengers in terms of growing crime.
Chief?
Thanks, Councillor Urbanovic, and thank you, Chair Edmund. So again, traditionally, we obviously, I think, and this was spoken to at the Committee of Whole, sometimes it's very challenging to compare service to service based on what's in the budget, what's not in the budget, what's regional based, etc. But we do our best through the Canadian Municipal Benchmarking Initiative, as well as through Statistics Canada, as to how we do some of the different work we do. So I'll speak specifically to Ontario. Generally we're in the lower tier, so cost per capita is in the lower tier. Ourselves compared to Halton and York are generally three of the police services who, from a cost per capita, are at the low end. And so we fare out very economically efficient for the staffing levels we have and for how we do our business and how we partner with the region on capital projects and different, integration of technology, et cetera. I recognize there's a lot of focus, but also when you look within our police services budget, we also provide support regionally. And the one example I'll use is our communication center is tied into the overall police budget, that has approximately 100 employees that provide 911 services. I mean, that's to support all regional. Under the Municipal Act, we actually serve as the call center for the regional municipality of Waterloo. So we're responsible for downstreaming to fire services, to Ontario Health, connecting with 211, et cetera. We support Alert Waterloo region. And then, of course, you add, for example, court services. We have almost a team of 80 members. Most of those either special constables or civilian professionals. But under the Police Services Act, we're required to ensure that our regional courthouse has adequate security. And the reality is that we have, because our courthouse is state of the art, we have many other jurisdictions holding court sessions within our facility. So those are a couple of the impacts of costing. So we have like an excellent regional courthouse where other jurisdictions come to. So when we look at it, and we look at, for example, on average, the average homeowner and or resident in the region is in the range of $648 per household. You break that down per month, it's around $55 per month, or break it down by day, it's about $1.80 for policing services that are 24/7, 365. So, we do definitely look at costs. We're obviously significantly concerned about budget implications. As the Regional Council may be aware, we've been reporting monthly to the Police Services Board on the impact of COVID. We've done, and kudos to the amazing leadership team and to our CFO, Ms. Kirsten Hand. She's mitigated significant costs within the organization under the leadership of Mark and Hsiu-Li. So we're in a good place economically, but we recognize some of the challenges. But again, I think that this is, if I can for a moment, is that policing services is almost 98% funded by the taxpayer. And we do a significant amount of federal policing, and we do a significant amount of provincial policing. And how we fund police services should be part of the provincial and national dialogue. That's the reality, is that the current taxation system, the local citizen in the region of Waterloo is paying for provincial policing services, for federal policing services, and locally for a municipal police service. And there's likely a discussion to be had both provincially and federally on how we fund police services, which also gets back to the basics of what are the core functions of policing. What does our community expect? What does our community need? And what are those functions that a police officer, somebody with the equipment and or the legislative powers, what are they required to do? And these are challenging conversations, both internally and externally, and with government levels. But I think collectively, we need to commit to these discussions. I'm committed to them, and I know the board, and I can't speak on behalf of the board, but Chair Redmond will know that I'm very committed to them. Mm-hmm. And historically, I think Councillor Galloway will know that these are conversations. It's hard to move the needle, but I think the current climate is the climate, Councillor Verbanovic, to advance change nationally and provincially. And now we have the momentum to rethink policing as we move forward. And I should add, I missed an early conversation. On connectivity, it just dawned on me. We looked at actually launching Connectivity 2.0 with our partners in March, and then the pandemic occurred, and we had to cease some of that work. So behind the scenes, I know that our team was working on what they called the project Connectivity 2.0, which was the next iteration and the next version.
Fantastic. And my last question, building on sort of all of this, is, I'm very encouraged around some of the things I'm hearing around, mental health. I was pleased to see your leadership and CACP's leadership around the decriminalization of drugs. The announcement last week that you made, which I think is an important step in all of this. And I'm a big believer, quite frankly, that we need to move as much mental health stuff away from policing. We need to also look at how do we, really look at those upstream investments in folks, so that, quite frankly, there's never a need for them to interact with the judicial system in any way. And so, in a perfect world, if I had to ask you, what are the sort of 2 or 3 things that you'd love to sort of see tackled? What would those be?
Chief, he's ending with an easy question.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Chair Redmond and Councillor Urbanovic. Well, at first, I think there's a couple of gems in our region. There's actually 3 gems in our region that I think we need to focus on collectively. As a police service, as a police board, regional council in our community. The first I talked about is restorative justice. There's different ways of doing business to reconcile issues. The second piece is we have had a long history and a long legacy of leadership with the Crime Prevention Council. And although there's lots of dialogue on the role of crime prevention and where it sits in the current community, I think there's opportunities around restorative justice, crime prevention, and the third being Waterloo well-being. And Waterloo well-being is focused on the social determinants of health. And if we actually begin to treat crime and look at the root causes of crime, and if I could just make, probably a generalized statement, but, and I think many of you have heard me say this, by the time the police service gets involved, from a systems perspective, we probably have significant gaps and or failures. And I think of, in my term and my tenure as the chief of police, we've had a series of, police shootings and a fatal shooting. And the comments that I made at the time to the Police Services Board, that the death at the hands of the police service really looks at the overall challenges as a system, and it's a failure of all of our systems. And so I think that, the 3 pieces that I think that we need to focus on collectively, because this is a massive, we're talking about massive transformation and organizational change. But if you think of regionally, if we were able to thread 3,500 mental health calls for service from, frontline police response, and we can break that down into how many, hours of work that requires, how many officers, and the cost to that. And if we can, reinvest in other areas, I think that would be a major success. I think it's a start to a significant amount of challenges, particularly as we focus around, when we come in contact with our racialized communities, those that are marginalized, those that are actually do not have there's social disparity and economic disparity. If we're candid with ourselves, that's who we come in contact with. We often come in contact with those that don't have the same opportunities as others. And often the behavior and or the actions are criminalized, when really at the heart of it, the person may not be a bad person. And don't get me wrong, there are people I believe in society that require the judicial system and require corrections. But the reality is the individual who took the meat from the store, often it may be simply because they're hungry. Or the young parents that, stole some diapers is because financially maybe they can't afford what they require. And I think that, if we can focus on affordable housing, we can focus on mental health, and we can invest in those areas, I think from a policing perspective, you'll find that our role will change naturally within society. And we'll see the successes of upstream by focusing on the social determinants of health. So that would be my wish, is let's have a larger dialogue around social determinants of health. Let's focus on anti-racism. Let's focus on eliminating hate from our communities. Let's focus on the police service growing and learning and innovating along with other institutions. And let's commit to those changes. I think that, if we collectively tackle mental health and as a police service, we make that a priority around, we're going to change our model. I think you'll start to see other economic impacts come to fruition. You'll see demand come to fruition. And I think we'll see, quite frankly, for the client, the citizen, the patient, a better outcome. And isn't that our goal? Isn't our goal for the individual that, all of our systems come in contact to live a better life, I know that that's my commitment. And I know that that's our members' commitment. So there's work to be done, but I guess in a long way, I would say, let's not lose sight of the great work that, restorative justice, crime prevention, and well-being have, and let's look at how do we integrate those three for positive change. And then secondly, let's tackle mental health. And then other pieces to Councillor Galloway's comments around re-envisioning will come along.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you. I have Councillor Erb and then Councillor Shantz. Councillor Erb, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief Larkin, for your presentation, and to your team for all the work they do in keeping the residents of Waterloo region safe. And I apologize if I was disconnected for a short period of time during your presentation, if this was answered. It's good to see the work that you're doing internally related to the equity, inclusion, and diversity. And I'm wondering, how is that reflected in the hiring process of new employees at that come on to Waterloo Police Services, be it frontline workers or administrative people? So the work that the atmosphere that you're trying to create internally, how is that reflected in the people you hire?
Chief?
Thanks, Chair Edmund. Over to you, Councillor Erb. And so one of our key pillars was that actual reflection of our workforce reflective of the community. And so there's been significant work. And so there's a couple of pieces where we've seen change. One is the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police has been working with an external consultant and a subject matter expert in partnership with the Solicitor General to, quite frankly, overhaul the constable selection system. There's a province-wide system that police services participate in. I'm really excited that one of the pieces that has been built in even to the constable selection system is unconscious bias as a part of the recruiting tool. Also being built into the process is predictive index. There's always been significant psychological work, but that was really around deceit and corruption and some of those pieces, and where it's moving much towards resiliency, empathy, emotional intelligence into the talent that we acquire. And that's the provincial model. I do believe there continues to be need for change provincially around our training at the Ontario Police College. I do believe that the curriculum needs enhancement, and we're working on that. And I can tell you that I'm advocating for that as I represent the Ontario Chiefs on an executive oversight committee. But internally, the work that we've been doing, quite frankly, is actually enhancing the competency around diversity with our recruiters. So we do have a team of recruiters. We have 3 civilian professionals. We have 3 uniformed professionals and a supervisor that are responsible for recruitment of all positions. And every job description right now is actually being reviewed through an equity lens to ensure that there's no systemic barriers, there's no systemic bias in those job descriptions, and then all of the testing is being reviewed to ensure that there's no systemic barriers, no systemic bias. So for example, in our constable selection system, we used to have candidates participate in spelling tests and essays and those types of pieces. And the reality is that those are, quite frankly, barriers to new Canadians, to individuals where English is not their first language. And so we've actually reworked and removed those systems and look at evaluating and organizing very differently. The other piece that we're applying is an organizational need. And so we look at, and we're not exactly there yet because we're doing our internal census right now across our organization to figure out who are we? And so who do we represent and where are we underrepresented? And that will apply an organizational need to all of our recruiting processes. So we anticipate Deputy Crowell is leading that process, along with Ms. Molly Kimple, our HR director, and our team within HR, Mr. Will Peckham, who manages our culture and organization development. We anticipate that we'll be in a good place into September around advancing some of those pieces. But if you look at, and I know our board members could chime in, naturally, some of the diversity recruitment efforts that we've been doing, some of the outreach to our academic institutions, the caliber of candidate that comes into our organization is super impressive. I often, and this is not to downplay the seriousness, but I often joke with Chair Redmond that I'm glad I got hired 30 years ago because I would not be a competitive candidate today. Like, the quality of the candidates is outstanding. And so that's slowly changing the culture. And then, of course, we've revamped our transfer and promotional processes a very similar recruitment process. So lots of work happening. Is it perfect yet, Councillor Erb? No. Does it need improvement? Yes, it does. And we continue to use external consultants to advance our hiring, our talent acquisition, but also our internal processes. So, for example, civilian professionals have the opportunity internally to bid and or apply for different variations of jobs. We have more than 73 different civilian professional positions. So we also are looking at all of those processes to ensure an egalitarian approach, one that is free of systemic barriers, systemic bias.
Councillor Erb? Councillor Erb, do you have additional questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. And I don't have a question, and I won't take a long time. It's been a long day for most of us here. I just wanted to say thank you to the chief. And as someone who's been on the board for just a little over a year, I've been really impressed with the chief's sincerity and ability to facilitate change locally and across the province. He's always looking at new models of policing. We've added a number of civilian positions in the last number of years to complement the police officers. And the collaboration that he's spoken of many times between the police and organizations in the community, as well as across the province, is going to bode well for the future for us. And I have no doubt that going forward, we will continue to see good things from our regional police. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other speakers. So, Chief, I want to thank you very much. This was something that came out of a unanimous motion by Regional Council. I thank you for coming. You've, I think, sort of marked out that September may be another watershed moment. I'm wondering if that might be an appropriate time sometime in the fall to come back and give us an update.
Chair Redmond, certainly, through your direction and as chair of the board, along with Keith and Councillor Shantz, I know our service would be pleased to return. And again, I want to take this opportunity just simply to thank Regional Council for your continued support and the leadership of our police service board. Chair Redmond, you've been doing significant external engagement, and we look forward as a police service to supporting the work that you've been doing, not only as the regional chair, but as the board chair. But we'll certainly earmark the September date. And I will tell you that, I just want to reassure all regional councillors, these are challenging times, and your concerns and the sentiments that you've echoed are something that I take very seriously, and they're my responsibility. I want to ensure you that they're my responsibility along with our executive and leadership team, and I would simply want to reiterate the support for our frontline members that do great things every single day. Not perfect, human, but attempting to do good things. So we'll earmark September, and once again, thank you for the opportunity. It's our privilege to serve the citizens of Waterloo Region, and I want to reassure you of our commitment to positive, progressive, modern, and innovative change. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So, colleagues, we have some very patient delegations who have been waiting. I think this meeting was supposed to start at 1 o'clock today, but we're a little behind our time. So I'd like to welcome the delegations for their patience and persistence and tell them they each have 5 minutes. I will provide a 1-minute warning to allow them to finish up their presentation. First, we have Fiqir Worku, Advisory Group Member, ACB Network of Waterloo Region. Welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Tim Hunter, and I'm representing Fiqir Worku and reading her statement as a delegate from the ACB Network.
Go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Fiqir Worku. I was born and raised in the Waterloo region. I've went to school here and worked here and have watched the Waterloo region grow both in size and potential. I have a little brother who is autistic and have volunteered at Kids Ability as he has gone to his therapies. Last week, when I heard about the brutal violence carried out by the Waterloo Regional Police to resident Abdisalam Omar, It only confirmed my fears of police interactions for those at the intersection of Blackness and mental illness. This is a man known to the community as experiencing very visible health issues. You can very clearly hear in the video shared by the ACB network his community's cries for help, yelling to the police that Abdusalam experiences mental health issues. Their cries were ignored and continue to be ignored by this council and the regional chair and other local representatives from our government. The call to defund is founded in serious community concerns for our safety, requiring over 10 police officers to apprehend an unarmed man with mental health issues does not instill confidence in their ability to de-escalate. Instead, it sends a message to neurodiverse communities and Black communities that their voice does not matter and that there will be no recourse for the pain inflicted. It sends a message to me that Abdusalam could have been my brother and that I can't do anything to protect him from police brutality that exists in our region. We have seen the region innovate, leading the way in public smoking bylaws in the early 2000s and in the development of the Blue Box program. We know that the region is capable of innovative change, but right now, we are also seeing the region be more amenable to some community causes more so than others. The calls from the Black Lives Matter Solidarity March were clear. Defund a portion of the police budget. Initiatives that do not reflect the calls to action of the march are an insult to those that have been and continue to be the target of police violence, as well as the over 30,000 residents that attended in person and online. True crime prevention starts with prioritizing social programs. I hope this council will once again innovate with the community in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. I don't see any questions, but thank you for your presentation. And thank you again. You probably spent a lot of your day waiting, so really do appreciate your taking the time to present this statement.
Thank you.
Seeing no questions, I will go to our next delegation, Ruth Cameron. Welcome, Ruth. You have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Good evening. I want to thank Chief Larkin for setting up my speaking point so well. The scripted conversation with Councillor Verbanovic points to the scope creep over the last 30 years, where through wage theft in health, community, and social services and reallocation of those revenue lines to police has taken place. The in-depth description of the mental health-related incident in Victoria Park has breached a client's confidentiality with identifiable information, and I hope it'll be edited from the live stream when it is left on the internet. Clearly, we need to defund and rehire community members and professionals to do mutual aid, care, health, and social services work. And restore decent work to more people. It's also important, before I really get into my presentation, to point out that EDI initiatives do not reduce police violence, and that implicit bias training is not evidence-based. It's been proven to be completely ineffective in reducing violence and killings of Black and Indigenous people. So I'm a little concerned because I don't see any evidence presented of change in policing's negative impact on Black and Indigenous people. Good evening. My name is Ruth Cameron. I'm the Executive Director of ACCKWA. I'm a member of the ACB Network's Advisory Committee, a doctoral student at Wilfrid Laurier University, and I'm a consultant who focuses on anti-racism, anti-oppression, organizational change management initiatives. I do research on effective ways to improve health and equity for disadvantaged groups. Something that I want to talk to you a little bit about today is some experiences recently in the community, as well as some of my experiences coming to Kitchener. So after having what was possibly the largest Black Lives Matter Solidarity March in Canada, we had our attendees read and affirm calls to action that were put forth by event organizers, sending thousands of letters to representatives locally. The request was simple. The request was essentially to stop killing us, end the over-policing and surveillance of our neighborhoods, families and households, on campus, in schools, and through community policing programs, reallocate dollars from the police budget to foster our well-being by us, for us. After the march, there were also several solidarity statements from regional and city governments, but we really want to emphasize that solidarity is demonstrated far more effectively through actions than through words. Racism was a primary concern for me when I started to work in the region in 2013. I knew of persistent white supremacist activity in the region, and I wondered how risky it would be to work here as a single parent. I knew of Howard John Monroe and the unforgivably long time it took for his murderers to be sentenced, and I knew about the racist and coded reporting on the killing of John James, who was described as large and violent, versus the person who killed him, Zachary Schultz, who was described as a slight college student. I knew that Zachary was released custody before the investigation was even finished. And I also knew about the persistence of hate groups like the Slingers, Sons of Odin, and other local neo-Nazi groups. And essentially, it feels like they've been allowed to exist in our community for a very long time. I've had many instances of experiences with over-policing in Kitchener. I've been tailed by police for driving while black. I've had police pull into parking lots on 4 separate occasions to surveil black people leaving events that I've hosted with colleagues. I've counted and timed the hourly patrol of police vans in the Chandler Mowat neighborhood when I've been at work meetings, and I've experienced the police presence at Pride as a queer black woman. I've actually complained to Chief Larkin about officers intimidating some of ACCWA's black volunteers at an agency appreciation event where a police officer questioned the right of our communities to gather for recreation and leisure in the park, which really undid years of anti-stigma and volunteer recruitment work that were conducted by my staff. So I question the ability of police to do anti-racism work when I've experienced racism from my entire life in all the places where I've lived and worked. In the 80s, Canada, I believe, started its military peacekeeping mission in Somalia. I was in the military in the 90s, and I remember the experience of being in the military and being in horror when I heard about the details of the torture and murder of Shidana Aron when those details came to light. The horror continued that summer because I was actually on base away from home, being trained and sharing barracks with members of the Airborne Regiment who joked about lynching a black youth. I was terrified for my safety. And I want to talk about how there is sharing of roles and methods and equipment in policing because of it's become more militarized over the years. Recently, on July 3rd, I was forced myself to watch the video that came out regarding Abdisalam Omar's arrest. Now, something that I think is important to note is that he was arrested and beaten in his own over-policed Kitchener neighborhood at the hands of Waterloo Region police that were well aware of his mental health issues. My anxiety climbed as I watched the young men filmed in the act of witnessing his arrest alternate between bearing witness, intervening at a distance to protect his safety, and then turning away because they were terrified they were going to see an act of violence they would never be able to forget. As Black people, we witness this domestic terrorism of persistent police presence in our lives, in our communities, and police violence and shootings with a regularity that it's been declared a public health crisis by many departments of public health, the American Public Health Association, and the Canadian Public Health Association, but it hasn't been declared a public health crisis by our own regional Department of Public Health.
So Ruth, you've got 1 minute left, so if you can finish up.
Yes, I can. So I just want to talk about the fact that, in addition to all of this regularity, there's been a lot of focus now on anti-bias training and diversity and equity initiatives. It's been shown that these actually teach police to mask biases with socially appropriate responses while harm continues. There's plenty of evidence that show in the United States in the last month, police officers maiming their own anti-racism trainer, as well as police murdering Black people on camera. So technology is not the answer. We're forced to endure the systemic violence and its negative health impacts every day. And this talk of new diversity initiatives, hiring more diverse forces, is not a guarantee and it's not a promise that or a declaration that this is unacceptable. That we are going to do everything that we can within our power to make sure that this type of domestic terrorism ends.
Ruth,
I
do
have
you have a concluding
well-founded fears
thought?
for my safety and for my community, and I'd like to see an evidence-based intervention like defunding brought forward to actually improve our health, well-being, and safety.
Thank you, Ruth. And again, thank you for your patience. I don't see any questions, so thank you very much for delegating and offering that point of view.
Thank you.
Colleagues, I'm going to go on to communications. You have got council information from July the 8th distributed electronically, as well as July the 14th. Any questions on any of that information that you've received? Seeing none, I will consider a motion to go into committee of the whole to consider reports. This is moved by Councillor Armstrong and seconded by Councillor Clark. If you would please use your check mark or X to vote, unless you're in the chamber, and then you can just raise your hand. I'm assuming this is yes. Okay. Thank you. Did everybody vote and I missed it? Okay. Everybody, okay, it's carried. Thank you. They're really quick about taking it down, I guess. We will now have one motion to accept the finance report items A through F. If anyone has any comments, please raise your hand at this point. If not, this is moved by Councillor Erb and seconded by Councillor Foxton. All right, and please again go ahead and use your check marks or X's, and if you're in the chamber, that is in agreement. Thank you. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. Committee of the Whole reports. And I will accept a motion, and I believe that you have a new summary. Everybody should have gotten on their desk who is here. Did councillors that are remote, did they get it electronically? Okay. Yes, so you should have got it electronically, so it's an updated one that reflects the activity and the motions that were dealt with in council. So the motion to go into the Committee of the Whole is moved by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Jowett. I see no discussions, so could you vote? Those in the chamber voting positively? Thank you. That is carried, colleagues. Thank you. Now we have in front of us a motion from closed session that we had at the end of committee day, and this is moved by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Foxton. And that recommendation is that Dr. Hsiu-Li Wang be appointed to be as the Commissioner of Public Health and Emergency Services and Medical Officer of Health, effective as of the date of the ministerial approval of the said Medical Officer of Health. This is great news, and I would ask you to vote with your hands or icons. That is carried unanimously, and I guess I can't let this opportunity pass without commending Dr. Wang and doing an outstanding job of navigating some uncharted and very heavy waters. I don't know, Dr. Wang's not in the meeting. She's oh, here she is.
Sorry.
Yay.
Thank you. Sorry, I was on another call. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you so much. I'm truly honored and extremely grateful.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Councillor Foxton.
Dr. Hsiu-Li Wang, you are an amazing person. I'm so proud and honored to have worked with you, especially dealing with COVID-19. I recognize the hours you put in, the stress you put in, the work you put in, your heart and soul is into it, and this region, and we're so honored that you're with us.
Thank you so much.
So you have the full confidence of the entire council and our gratitude from the community. So thank you, Dr. Wang.
Thank you so much. I'm a little bit speechless right now. I didn't realize we'd be talking about this like this, but I truly appreciate it. And thank you so much for the support of council. And I'm really looking forward to doing my best to serve this community, which is one of the finest communities in the world. Thank you.
And you know, Dr. Wang, I think like so many of your colleagues, your professional medical colleagues that went into public health, a lot of you never counted on being rock stars in the media, and you've done an amazing job.
Thank you. Thank you.
When we were looking at getting additional help for Dr. Wang, I said to her, even rock stars have backup bands. So thank you, and we look forward to having the minister sign those papers. And maybe we won't have to physically distance by then and we can celebrate.
Thank you. Thank you again.
So we have an acting CAO, Ms. Albright. Do you have anything to add or any comments at this point in time? Okay. I have no comments. Other matters under the Committee of the Whole, draft terms of reference, the ad hoc post-COVID-19 Economic Recovery Committee. This is moved by Councillor Armstrong and seconded by Councillor Jowett. And the recommendation is the draft terms of reference of the ad hoc post-COVID-19 Economic Recovery Committee be accepted as presented. I see no speakers, I see no questioners, so all those in favor, please vote. Oh, Councillor Bravanovich, is that a vote or a question?
No, that is a question. This is on the terms of reference?
Yes.
Yes. So my only question on the terms of reference, because this was an issue that we talked about when we were striking the committee, and then when I read the terms right now, they're quite open-ended. In terms of with the language shall include but not be limited to. And I just want to make sure that the committee stays within the realm of work that historically has been the region's focus around economic development, recognizing that we do have collaboratively Waterloo Region EDC and the work that they do. We've collectively had Best WR take on a piece of work, and then there's work that the individual municipalities are responsible for. And so I just want to make sure that is what's understood with the terms of reference in the way they're worded right now. Is that your understanding?
I've made it to most of the committee meetings. I know I had to leave early from the last one. My understanding is there's always been an acknowledgement that economic development is a shared responsibility of both the regional level as well as area municipalities, and that Waterloo Economic Development Corporation certainly has a role to play as well. I think it's been acknowledged from the get-go that the committee wanted to look at the levers that are available to regional council to cut red tape, to expedite economic recovery, and to hear from business what business needed. I know, Councillor Jowett, do you want to comment further?
Certainly, Chair Redmond, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, Mayor Verbanovic, we are not intending on duplicating anything. There isn't much time. We're trying to be a very nimble group, as Chair Redmond has suggested. Red tape is on our radar, and using our contacts to be able to expedite things to help small business with their recovery. But you should know there's not much being done by way of formalization without coming back to this group. So other than connecting dots for people and asking questions around what's not working, what can we do that can make things faster, anything that's applicable to our council will be coming back to this council. We're not interested in undermining any kind of democratic responsibility.
And just further to that, Councilor Verbanovich, there's also an acknowledgement that it would be the tools available at regional councils, at regional level of government, as opposed to intruding in area municipalities. And I think you were looking at overlap, right?
Yeah, because and certainly what I hear from businesses is help us, support us, don't get in the way. And the last thing we want to be doing right now is anything that would give any perception, in that direction. I mean, earlier today I had to step away to speak to the finance committee, and one of the things that they talked about in terms of the provincial finance committee is the whole issue of how can the provincial government continue to help us in terms of removing red tape to help in the economic recovery. And I know you spoke yesterday, Chair Redmond, to the committee.
I did. Okay, so if that answers your question, we'll proceed. Are you satisfied with that answer?
I am. Thank you so much.
All right, so we're going to go back to the vote. So all those in favor will please use your little check marks or X's, and the 3 people in the chamber will vote yet again, but we'll only count you once. That is carried. The next motion is moved by Councillor Galloway and seconded by Councillor Clark, and that is that the ad hoc COVID-19 Economic Recovery Committee recommends that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo advocate to the Province of Ontario to expedite the reduction of business education tax rates in 2021 to provide tax relief to all commercial and industrial properties. I see no questions. I see no hands. I would ask you again to use your icons if you're working remotely. And those in the chamber, this is yes. Okay, so we have 3 in support in the chamber. So that is carried. So before I entertain a motion to go back into the committee of the whole, and I apologize, Dr. Wang, because we've just praised you and now I'm going to put you on the spot. There was a previous opportunity for you to bring us up to date with COVID-19. And I know you live and breathe all of this. Would you like to give us a quick public update on anything that we should know?
Sure. So I don't really have anything new since Chair Redmond, you and I did our press briefing yesterday, but I can let the council know that we're continuing to head in the right direction. Our case rates remain low and stable, and we are in the best place that we've been since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, what I've been saying is, while that's very encouraging, we are going to be moving into stage 3, which is wonderful. But because of that, and because of the increased interactions that will necessarily take place as part of stage 3, we all need to continue to exert the utmost vigilance and continue to practice those recommended public health measures, and of course adhere to our new regional bylaw with respect to the wearing of masks. So I'm optimistic that our community, which has been very responsible and doing the right things, is going to continue to follow the advice. And I just want to take the opportunity actually to thank Council for their support of the public health recommendations, for for the regional bylaw that was recently passed, and thank all the residents as well for all their efforts to getting us to where we're at. So it's a good place to be at, but we need to continue to be very careful and keep up those public health measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Councillor Galloway. Councillor Galloway, I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, I am, sorry. This is not a question to Dr. Wang, I don't believe, but more of a comment and maybe a question. I don't know if Ms. Fletcher is on the call still or not, but I think it was somewhat fortuitous on our part to have passed the bylaw last week. Now that stage 3 is upon us, I think we would have been doing a very hurry up proposal for a bylaw if we had not yet done it for stage 3, because stage 3, while it's great that we're opening up large parts of the economy, it also has with it some additional risks. And the MASH bylaw, I think, is even more important now than it was possibly a week ago. And I am curious whether or not if Ms. Fletcher is on the call or any other staff that might be able to comment
on the call.
On how the first 3 days or 2.5 days of the bylaw has gone. Is there confusion? Is there what level of compliance, if we know, there has been?
So, Chairman and members of council, in preparation for this evening's meeting, I have, collected some information and statistics about kind of where we've been over the past week and a day with respect to the face covering bylaw. So, as of today, we've had approximately 220 either email or voicemail questions regarding the face covering bylaw. We are attempting to work through those particular questions on a case-by-case basis in order to provide as much help to individuals in understanding the requirements of the bylaw as possible. Stage 3 always brings with it a number of questions. So every time we've had a change with respect to provincial orders, we have had a flurry of questions and activities related to that specific activity as a whole right off the top. So regardless of whether there's a face covering bylaw or there isn't, those kinds of questions abound from the business communities who are impacted by those very specific changes. So, we also have had a large number of hits to the region's website with respect to the various activities that are ongoing. And I believe the response to the region's website was around 39,000 hits to those particular pages related to the face covering bylaw. So again, the information that has been provided to the public is being consumed on a regular basis. Yes, that sometimes results in more questions that come in through the call center or through the region's website in trying to understand things, but we're very, very active in the community right now. With respect to compliance related activities, we've only had a couple of people out in the field kind of judging compliance. I can't specifically say that, this is statistical in any way, shape, or form, but there's a general sense that we have 80 to 85% compliance within the community with respect to face covering. So we'll continue to work at it. We'll continue to get more questions. Certainly, people want to do the right thing, and we're here to help them to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. Councillor Galloway, any more questions?
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. A question for Ms. Fletcher. I think we communicated on this a little bit. I had a couple of conversations with of the Old Order community who was asking me about churches, and I know Councillor Harris made a motion that that didn't go anywhere at our last meeting. So my understanding from that is that pastor, and I share this, I guess, by way of information and any clarification that Chris needs to make, but the pastor at the front of the church does not have to wear a mask. The sanctuary, you can have up to 30%, or I guess I should ask that as a question. How many people can be in a church for a church service, not a wedding or a funeral?
Ms. Fletcher?
So there's two pieces here. So my understanding is that the current orders allow 30% of in places of worship to be able to be in the particular place of worship. So that is determined by that place of worship about what that 30% capacity is.
Okay, and then participants in the service are required to wear a mask even if they are physically distanced.
So people who are sitting in the congregation or in the assembly of some kind are still required to wear a mask. And one of the things that I would draw kind of an akin to that is this Friday, one of the things that is opening is a cinema. So people who go and sit and watch movies who are in a general congregation or a general seating area. And, our advice to businesses of that nature at this point in time is that those people who are sitting in the general seating area is in fact an enclosed public space, and therefore a mask should be worn.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Councillor Foxton.
Just a little update. So after we had now passed the bylaw, people were putting on Facebook, we're going to go shop in Brantford, then we're not shopping in Waterloo Region. And the same day, Brantford had 2 businesses have outbreaks, and they passed the mask bylaw, as did Brant.
Thank you. Yes, I think that any of us could have realized the sweet spot we got in the timing of this. I think there are more and more examples of why it is prudent to make it. And again, I feel like I'm channeling Dr. Wang here, but it's one of the tools in the kit. We still need to have physical distancing, good hand hygiene, don't touch our faces, stay home when you're sick, and get tested if you have symptoms. All of that. I've also been questioned with why we said up to 5 you don't have to wear a mask. And yet I've anecdotally heard of people that thought it was really cute, but you can't keep it on a 4-year-old. They just keep ripping it off. And I think the opportunity to become infected is probably, more likely. They should keep their hands off their face. So thank you, Dr. Wang, for that impromptu update. Thank you, Ms. Fletcher, for filling us in how we're tracking our first few days with mandatory mask wearing. I would now consider a motion for the Committee of the Whole to rise and Council to resume, and this is moved by Councillor McGarry and seconded by Councillor Kiefer. I'd ask you to use your icons again if you are remote, and those of us in the chamber are in agreement. That is carried. Now entertain a motion to adopt proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. This is moved by Councillor Jaworski and seconded by Councillor Clark, that the committee adopt the proceedings of the whole. I'd ask you again, use your icons, and in the chamber, all in favor? Thank you. Are there any motions? Notices of motion? Unfinished business? Other business? Any questions? So I would now entertain a motion to enact the bylaws first, second, and third readings. And this is moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Schatz. It's a bylaw to appoint deputy clerks in the absence of the regional clerk and deputy clerk, and to repeal bylaw 18-037, and a bylaw to appoint the Commissioner of Public Health and Emergency Services and Medical Officer of Health. And lastly, a bylaw to confirm the actions of council on July the 15th, 2020. I would ask you to use your icons. And in the chamber, those in favor, that is unanimous. That is carried. We now need a motion to go into closed session. This is moved by Councillor Shantz and seconded by Councillor Verbanovich. All those in favor, please use your icons. Those in the chamber, that is unanimous. That is passed. So thank you to the public who have been part of this conversation and listening to this council meeting. We will now go off of live streaming and go into closed session. You need a motion. We need a motion to adjourn to. This is moved by Councillor Galloway and seconded by Councillor Kiefer. All those in favor. You should see how fast the three hands went up in the chamber. That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Councillors, please stay where you are and stay on line. And thank you to the public. I might have done some people a whole lot. Just go.